Hey, everybody, welcome to Disrupted Science, the occasional conversation between the authors of the forthcoming book, How the Internet Disrupted Science. I'm Kent Anderson, and we're recording this on Wednesday, June 18th, 2025, and I'm here with my co-author, Joy Moore. Hi, Joy.
Hi, Kent. What's up? So what is this, week 4?
It's week 4,
Yeah.
and I think we're kind of getting the feel for it. We really
Well, don't
appreciate
jinx
it.
it. We still have to get through this one. Let's leave
Okay.
this let's leave this to the whoever wants to watch us to let us know.
Okay. I'm just being an optimist. But speaking of optimists, over my shoulder, you might notice that there's a picture of 3 Boston Bruins hockey players, Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara, and in the center, number 63, Brad Marchand, who just won his second Stanley Cup at the ripe old age of late 30s in hockey, with the Florida Panthers and scored 6 goals during the Stanley, 5 goals in the Stanley Cup. I forgot, I lost track. So many goals. Was so productive. He was traded late in the season and managed to win his second Stanley Cup. And I can tell you, every hockey fan in Boston that I know of, at least, is super happy for him because it, he was the captain. He got traded. We all have problems with the Bruins ownership, but for him to have personal success and hoist the Stanley Cup again was amazing to see.
So where did he go? He went to Florida?
Yeah, the Florida Panthers, this is their second consecutive Stanley Cup victory.
Is
And
that like what is with Boston? Is that like Tom Brady went to
yeah,
Tampa? Why
I
are
know,
they
I know.
becoming snowbirds, or
Yeah, it's
is
like
there some
Southern
kind of
Massachusetts down there or something. I don't know. It's like they steal all our best athletes and then win championships. And
yeah.
luckily they don't have a nose for baseball, but then neither do we. So we just traded another player. When enough sports talk. Anyhow, I'm very happy for Brad Marchand. I love comeback stories and ways to that great competitors can get to taste the peak of victory one more time. And he was super thrilled, and I think a lot of hockey fans were too. So it's a great little story. That's what I'm kind of happy about today. So
Awesome.
anything you're happy about today?
I'm happy about I got to take the dogs to the beach this morning. We haven't done
Nice,
that in a while, and
nice.
there was nobody else there. So that's a
That's
good
always
day.
nice. That's a good day. That's a good day. Well, this week we want to talk about kind of following up on an interview we had with Anita Chan from the University of Illinois Champaign, published yesterday on the Geyser. We're going to take a deeper dive into AI and how it's being embraced in the scientific publishing space. And the major question we're asking is, does AI lead us down the wrong road? And what kind of triggered this was you came across the peer review week
Yeah,
theme
the
this year.
announcement for the theme for peer review in September, I believe, peer review week is peer review in the age of AI. And that just got me thinking, how do these two things go together? I know there's been a lot of software development for the kind of the tactics of peer review to help some of the administrative work and pre-checks and things like that. Um, but in general, the broader notion of combining very human, specific, in many cases, opinionated, and thoughtful review of work with AI, which is kind of designed to do the opposite, right? And that came out
Right.
a lot in Anita's writing. And so that's what kind
Right.
of triggered the notion of let's talk about that for a little bit and see if we can kind of pick apart and make some sense of it, or raise some red flags if we've got any worth
Yeah,
raising.
or maybe we'll end up loving it and being
Yeah.
big advocates by the end of our discussion, but I don't think so. One of the things that really jumped out of Anita's interview to me was she really puts her finger on the arrogance of move fast and break things, where it's kind of this notion that, oh, what all you yucks have been up to over these past 4 centuries has been garbage. Now here we are, we're going to move very fast and make things in ways that only we brilliant people can figure out, and we're going to break all your things in the process. But whatever we do, is better. And I think that she has a fundamental issue with that, as I think we all should. And we have to kind of
And I
test
think
everything on its
another
own. Yeah.
aspect to the move fast and break things in tech is you're not going to get it right on the first time, so don't slow down and try to get it right. Right?
Right.
Perfect is the enemy of good. So you're going to
Right.
break some things along the way to get
Right.
there.
And good is the
And
enemy of breaking things.
right.
Yeah.
And
And
so and I think it was don't be afraid to break things in the process because eventually, by doing that, we'll get to the right solution.
right,
Um,
right. It's part of a process of breaking
yes.
and rebuilding and all of that. And I think a couple of other things that she focused on was how AI tends to amplify what she calls majoritarian views.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that that fits with science, right? Because
No.
science is about moving forward. It's a process. It's not about answers necessarily. It's about getting another step in the process. And scientists like to be proven wrong if they're sincere
Right.
about it. And so I think if you're using systems that use inference engines to amplify majoritarian views, you're going to have a more of a commoditized system and not have the humans who recognize when breakthroughs are happening. So,
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes me think. Let's talk for a minute about where in the spectrum of medical research and clinical information, it is good to have a majority view and where consensus is the goal. That would be in the guidelines, right? That go through
mhm,
committees within societies. And these are processes that take a look at all of the literature, all of the individual reports that have bubbled up through the literature. And then it takes a committee, sometimes years, months to years, to hash out how to get to a consensus that is worth recommending as a change in practice.
mhm.
Um, but that takes a lot of perspectives, and it's what the ACIP committee is used to doing, right?
Right,
That takes
right,
human beings with individual viewpoints and bits of expertise to come together to come up with a recommendation that's going to be the best for the greatest number of people.
right.
Um, and I
But it's
can't
not
imagine
but
how that,
there's not an answer necessarily. They
right.
have to arrive at an answer, but the
Yeah, it's
answer they
not a,
know if the imperfections in it, they understand it, they've discussed it, they fleshed it out, like we're doing here, right?
it's not a flattening. It
Right,
is a negotiation to get to a consensus.
right.
And um,
And those same people may be back next time and say, last year, here's what we got wrong. They can iterate on it. And they do so. One of the things that AI doesn't seem to do well is iterate consistently. So it tends to want to, it can draw different inferences at different times based on what how the question is posed or the input is arranged, how the prompts are customized, and
mhm.
just what it, it almost seems a little bit moody. But one of the things it brings to mind a story when I was at New England Journal of Medicine, one of the first times I attended one of the big review meetings, they brought forward a paper that had been rejected 11 years earlier. But it
Wow.
had been, yeah, but it had been rejected with the note of, we think you're onto something here,
Hmm.
but you don't have a patient population large enough to demonstrate what you're postulating and to convince us that it's true. And so they came back, they took that and they gave them all sorts of other feedback that experts in the field would give them. They came back 11 years later after getting a patient population large enough, running all the tests, developing the drug and all of that. And they came up with it's one of the MAB cancer drugs. I forget which one it was, but on PET scans, you would watch people who were treated with this and it would just, your cancers would just vanish.
Mm.
It was a miracle drug for certain cancers. And I don't think an AI system would have said, oh, I think you're onto something here, and encourage people to go off and do a better study and have the
Yeah.
expertise to do that. So, those are the kind of breakthroughs that I don't think that amplification of majoritarian views would catch.
Hmm. And also the longevity of the editorial group at the
Right.
journal.
The institutional
Um,
memory.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. But you were talking about guidelines, and we were talking earlier about systematic reviews and how those are now so difficult to do. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah,
about
there
that?
were a couple of really good papers that were published at the towards the end of last week. One was in Feb's Letters, and I think these authors did such a nice job. So I want to make sure that I get their names and the name of the paper right. Um,
Yeah, I'll try to put it up in a caption
yeah. Hold on.
or in the notes. Look in the
Okay,
show notes.
in
Ooh,
the
we get
show
to say
notes.
that.
Yeah, you can link below,
That's
like and
right.
subscribe.
Look
All right, so
at
this
us.
paper was by Jenny Barrio and Otto Kaliokoski, and I'm sure I got those wrong, so I apologize. But it was in the Scientist Forum section of Feb's Letters, May 21st. It was published a little while ago. And the title is Fraudulent Studies Are Undermining the Reliability of Systematic Reviews on the Prevalence of Problematic Images in Preclinical Depression Studies.
Mhm.
So this was kind of it was very thoughtful of them to write this up because it wasn't it was a kind of a behind the music. This is a
Mhm.
paper about what happened when they were trying to write a paper. They
Mhm.
weren't out there doing fraud detection, it found them. And so they wrote up their experiences and, to raise a concern that with the number of fraudulent images that they found as they were trying to do a proper vetted, cast the wide net systematic review, once they got into analyzing the images with software, they found that a good proportion of papers that came up in their search as candidates had to be discarded because the images were fraudulent.
Mhm.
Um, and that's hamstringing researchers who not only have to take more time to filter through what they're including in their reviews, but it makes them wonder, what they can trust.
Right.
And there was
Well,
a
and I think
sec.
that gets to one of the, oh,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead. Go
No, you
ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to step on your toes, so
Go
you go.
ahead.
Well, okay, it brings to mind. So there's a group in orthopedic surgery that said they're going to stop using uh, allowing papers based on public data
Hmm.
because those papers are being misused, which means those papers are out there, which AI systems may be ingesting
Yeah.
bad interpretations of public data. You have the NHANES group doing a similar thing. And
Hmm.
then the vaccine registry for adverse events, VAERS,
Bears. Yeah.
VAERS is being appropriated badly by people who have an anti-vaccine agenda. And so you have these papers going out there being ingested by AI systems and then AI systems generating papers. So it seems like it's not going in the right direction. But you were going to say, I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
No, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I spent some time going through the references in the Maha report.
Mm,
Um, and there were a lot of NHANES based papers. Again, it's not that the NHANES data is wrong, it's that it's being exploited for people to churn out papers um, based on kind of whatever point they want to make. And a lot of the references in the report were like one after the other of, we found this in Poland, we found this same thing in France. And it's just a formula where they can, go in and whip up the data and then churn out these these papers. And we were talking the other day, like in the context, and the authors of this paper in Febs pointed it out, and it really hit home, is they were surprised to find that a lot of the papers that had the fraudulent images were not, they were middling papers. It was an okay, conclusion. It was nothing really to write home about, which made me think these people are cheating to get a C minus, right? Like
Right.
that is such a jerk thing to do, because maybe it's enough for you to get a citation, to get published, to add to your CV, to, for your next performance review. But this junk is going out there like confetti into the wind,
Right.
for other people to have to sort through.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and that brings me to the second paper that came out last week. And this one was published in JAMA Network Open. And this one was about, not about images, but about citations. So citation contamination by paper mill articles in
Mm,
systematic reviews of the life sciences. And this one kind of took it to the next level of calling into question, what does it mean to do systematic reviews, today in the future, when the purpose of systematic reviews is to represent what's there.
right.
Um, and if retracted papers have already been incorporated, um, what does that mean,
Right.
for
Right.
the future?
Yeah, and there's a lot of issues with what's ingested into AI systems as far as what the source is, whether it's marked as retracted, because so many of the, when what we call the automated box of confusion gets triggered, all these copies go out to repositories, to PubMed Central, to ResearchGate, to Sci-Hub, all these places that, Facebook's Llama has been found to be crawling these, shadow libraries to get content. They're crawling preprint servers, and which version are they ingesting? Or is it marked as retracted? How do AI systems treat retracted papers? We don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of questions that, I think can be seriously asked of these systems as far as what they're doing. Um,
Yeah.
but there are a lot of
And
financial stakes around it too, right?
talk more about that.
What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say, on in terms of the retractions, there was a piece that ISI put out.
Mm,
Um, it was the senior editor at Web of Science, I believe, and because the impact factors came out today, I think,
yeah.
explaining more about their rationale around um, taking out retracted papers from the calculations. And it would be great to get their opinions as a group that does this through their systems, and they have to, I'm sure there's a bit of manual judgment involved. And clearly they have to do it at scale, and it's still a small percentage. Um, but it would be great to get their take on what they think that would take spread out across um, the rest of the citation networks, and whether that's something that could be managed by AI.
Yeah. Don't know. I mean, that's an interesting application, but that gets back to some of the questions. But also, my point I was going to move on to a point about how the kind of drive to embrace AI is partially driven by financial stakes, right?
Hmm.
Publishing companies want to look, especially the bigger commercial ones, want to look good on the market by having AI systems, because if you don't, you're a laggard, right?
Right.
And if you aren't embracing it as a professional, you might be viewed as a laggard too. So there's a professional incentive to, you know, have peer review week talk about AI and everybody kind of get behind that, because it's like, well, aren't I cool and aren't I cutting edge? But at the same time, what Anita Chan's interview kind of brought us back down to earth is that this mindless chasing of technology for years has done nothing really good in a lot of ways, and it's empowered people who have kind of questionable incentives. There are all these arms races. There's kind of this inevitability about AI that's been driven into our minds, and we've accepted. And there's political stakes now. Who's going to own the AI? Who's going to run it? Who's going to have the power over it? Who's going to understand how it behaves?
Mm-hmm.
And there are also commercial incentives for shortcuts because as these things become more heavily used and consumer facing, people are going to want fast response, right? They aren't going to sit patiently for 5 minutes while the AI gets the best answer possible. They're going to want
Yeah.
response, in 20 seconds. So, and AI companies are facing, pressure to conserve energy, to not, eat the planet while they're trying to get an answer for what's the best way to make creme brulee. And, you know, so they're going to be getting as many shortcuts as possible too. So there are lots of things to think about in this space. It's dynamic, it's commercial, it's full of ideas. And historically, AI was started because people wanted to create an artificial brain to understand how our brains worked. And now it's
Mm-hmm.
become this technological drive to replace us, which is another aspect of the technology piece that I think we need to appreciate too, that how technology has kind of moved into this replacement of human
Yeah.
activity zone, which we kind of started talking with. But there's my monologue. Sorry.
Did you see Ed Zitron's post yesterday on sincerity?
I did
Um,
not.
if you haven't, check it out. It's a good read. Ed Zitron is a journalist, I believe, but he's one of the most outspoken critics of AI in how it is being financed and how it's being sold to the public.
Mhm.
And he's really smart. He's a good read. But his post yesterday was about how AI is talked about in the media, and he's making the case for sincerity,
Mm.
and that this dedication, not only by the companies who are promoting what's just around the corner, but also um, the insatiable need for journalists to basically take whatever they say and run with it.
Right.
And so it's whether to scare us into statements that AI is going to replace a third of the white collar workforce in 3 years, or whatever. They're just
Right.
taking these statements from the AI companies and putting it out in the public to get people riled up, or AI is going to solve this and it's going to solve that. And so he made a pretty strong case against what we're not seeing there is evidence that it's actually, people aren't backing it up with examples.
Right.
Um, and I wonder how the examples are going to start to come out of what the experiments or production workflow tools that have been put in place with journals.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
it'll be
don't know
interesting.
where we
And
are in terms of, proven results and things like that. So hopefully that'll be something that's talked about at peer review week in some of the
yeah,
presentations.
yeah, I hope so because other industries you've heard, the workers complain about it. It adds to their
Mm-hmm.
workload. It complicates their systems. They don't like it. It makes the, things that they had handled more difficult to do. And so they wanted, the ability to turn it off. And so it'll be interesting to see if people and, handling the workflows and peer review and all of those things have a similar experience in scientific publishing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a hype cycle and everybody benefits because all those journalists get clicks and they look good.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we're living in a hype cycle and we need to so our job's to puncture that. So we're going to puncture it a little bit. But, I think,
Hey,
and
if there's hype worth bragging about, we're
Yeah, if there are
looking for it.
results, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, that's great. I
Yeah.
mean, I think, I think there are really good AI implementations in very narrow spaces. So,
Mm-hmm.
there are probably really good ones in astrophysics, handling all sorts of stellar data to get it to a point where a human can look at it and make sense of it, right? Where they
Yeah.
can do a beautiful animation of a flyby of Io or
Mm-hmm.
something like that with the help of AI. But I think the narrowness is crucial in some ways because, as you and I have talked about, science is not one thing. Science
No.
is a lot of things. It's a process. So you can't throw an AI system at science
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. You have to have it customized and manufactured for something, some specific purpose. And so some of the things we talked about, as far as production tasks, routinizing those. I mean, I still worry about that because my experience has been that actually handling little things can give you big insights,
Yeah.
and dithering over details, can make you pause and get a pattern in your mind that you wouldn't have had otherwise, even across time. And so, and catch things that an AI system, if it's you know, devoted to a discrete paper and or a discrete journal may not catch that humans in the lunchroom talking, comparing notes might catch. But if you
Yeah.
don't have those things as part of your mental library, you're not going to be talking about them with your colleague and saying, "Yeah, did you notice that too? Oh my gosh, yeah, we've got to tackle that. That's something the AI
Yeah.
system is going to be like, my job's done. I'm out of here." So,
Right. And particularly, thinking about the society journals that I've worked with over the years. I mean, they're going to see a paper and they're going to know that, so and so is in a beef with, somebody else. So, that's the classic. So we're not going to send that out to peer review to that person. Or they might know that they've just published something somewhere else, or there is that context of everything might tick the box. They've filled out all the application appropriately and all the pieces are there and the images aren't fraudulent, but there may be something going on within the context of that community that would either make that paper more important or might be something that they want to take a closer look at.
right.
And
Or they
that's
may just
where,
have the interpretation kind of, wrong. But, I don't know.
yeah.
The boundary for these systems is really important to monitor,
Mm-hmm.
how far they go into the intellectual process of evaluating new scientific claims. And I
Yeah.
would I would tend to pull up shorter, and than maybe some of these systems are proposing to pull up.
Yeah. And is the workload on staff for checking the checklists, um, is that greater or less than the amount of work that they would have had to do to just do it themselves?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that'll be interesting to see. So if you are one of those people using AI and you're
Hmm.
finding it frustrating, let us know.
And if you love
Because
it, please tell us why.
yeah, 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 we're happy to hear either one, but we want reality because
Mhm.
that's where we're going to get the answers. And so, we're in a hype cycle. Everybody's saying this is great and everybody's trotting around with AI placards, but we
Mhm.
think that there's more here than meets the eye, and we need to kind of peel it back and make sure it's actually serving science and actually serving the claims space well, and making sure that scientists are getting the best information possible, because
Yeah.
tech doesn't have a great track record in helping us out, actually. If you look back over the last 20, 25 years, they tend to, they say they're part of the solution, but more often than not, they seem to be part of the problem. So,
Well, and Anita's book took us back a century, right? And
right.
what we learned the last time, or
Mhm.
in recent history, that there was a big push in this country to develop data on individuals and kind of what happened with that. Should we spend a couple minutes talking about that? Because that
Yeah,
brought out
because it's
some
really fascinating.
themes.
Yeah. Yeah, so the big data movement seems to have started with the eugenics movement.
Hmm.
and categorizing people based on photographs, photography, um, personal data, measurements, things like genetic, genealogy, or recording their personal histories or race or whatever, and then cruelly applying that to diminish certain groups and elevate other groups, and kind of with the whole idea that there was a way to make people better, or get rid of the people who were a burden on society. And there's a little bit, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit of a thread of that here, where you humans aren't doing your peer review quite right. Let us build a machine that can do it better. But we don't know what kind of assumptions are inside that machine, right?
Hmm.
And there's a worrisome trend about how people in Silicon Valley think about others, right? There's a history uh, of misanthropic views, a history of fatalism. I mean, they've got their bunkers in Hawaii, and their escape yachts, and there's a history
Your
of
medical
racism.
emergency kits.
Right. Yeah. Their history of racism and sexism, and in the data, because again, bringing data from the past forward and making inferences around it brings a lot of old opinions about others with it too. And
Hmm.
it's not necessarily that data is a clean slate. Data, because like you were mentioning, big data started in eugenics. Big data is not a panacea itself. And so you start putting big data into an inference engine, and from many, many academics have found repeated problems with the kinds of crime that these systems identify. They tend to leave white suburbs alone and concentrate
Hmm.
on areas of urban areas with minority populations, because that's where the police have historically looked. And so these systems are like, well, that's obviously where you look. And
Right.
we're entering an era now where, like we talked about last week with our gaslight journals, people are purposely filling the scientific space with misinformation.
Yeah.
And how are these systems going to deal with that? And and these people tend to have a little bit of soft eugenics themselves, like let people die of COVID. We'll have
Hmm.
herd immunity when we get the most physically able to resist the disease as leftovers, once we let the disease go through the weaker members of our society. And so there's a lot of
Yeah,
layers
and
here.
Anita was talking about the at the turn of the century, that as the data collection took off, that the people found a pleasure in being included, because
Hmm.
in this personal way, because that means you get to compare yourself to other people.
Right.
And so that really played into, oh, are my, is my heritage better than yours, and things like
Right.
that. And a lot of that sentiment is coming through in what the Maha agenda is about.
Hmm.
And going through the report, which I really didn't want to do, but I was interested in the references,
Thanks for taking one
because
for the team, Joy.
yeah, if anybody wants it, I have it formatted and organized. If you get a friend to take out a subscription to the Geyser, I'll give you my copy of the Maha
Ooh,
references.
bonus, bonus. Okay, we'll put a graphic for that.
um, but the there's a the themes are, um, everybody is sick. Up until a month ago, 2 months ago, we thought we were okay, but now we're here to tell you that there's something wrong with all of you,
Hmm.
because of corruption, this, that, and the other, all these
Right.
things.
Pharma, environment, everything.
Right. And so monitoring, um, wearables is a big thing that came out the other day. Let's make junk food not cool and Apple Watches way cool,
Right,
Um,
right.
but it's
Glucose
using,
monitors for everybody.
yeah, oh yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
what happens after I eat ice cream? Is that what we're supposed to be thinking
Right.
about?
Shocking.
But yeah, but it's putting us in that mindset, is that if I'm not tracked, if I'm not following the rules of these experts, um, then I might be in the other group. I want to make sure that I'm in the in group.
Well, the distinction I always make in my mind to make it clear what is going on here, at least for me, is it used to be that people built things for others to make their lives easier, right? So people invented the bicycle to make walking more efficient. You could get farther with the same number of steps, so to speak. Or they
Mm-hmm.
built cars to make it so you could get to where you wanted to go faster, right? Now we've switched into this mode where we're going to change you. We're going to change
Right, because
you
you
as a
need
person
changing.
because you
There's
need
something,
changing. You're
yeah.
imperfect. Something's wrong with you. So it's no longer about building tech. It's not about building tech to make your life easier. Because if you've ever tried to use some tech in the last 5 years, you know that that's not what's happening. I mean, I just had a great Bluetooth experience, like three great Bluetooth experiences yesterday, and Siri still is an idiot. But it's not about making your life easier. Now it's becoming about changing you as a person, and that is definitely eugenic, uh, curious.
Yes.
So, yeah. And the other thing, one other thing, and then I think, maybe we can move on. But the business model aspects of this have to also be factored in. So there's licensing of content to AI systems. They're paying some publishers for this. Those seem like cheap date tickets. I think we're not selling for the kind of money we could, but at the same
But we
time,
don't know what it's being sold for. So it's either a awesome deal for nothing, or it's a terrible deal
well, right, but
in the end.
but then you have all this OA CCBY content, and there's more and more concern about CCBY and all of that, and as there should be, always should have been. But if I'm running an AI system, am I going to privilege licensed content over OA content, or am I going to privilege OA content, which I never will have to surrender or pay for again, most likely, over licensed content? So if I'm smart and I'm thinking about my profits down the road, I'm going to privilege OA content over
Hmm.
licensed content. And just so my system doesn't croak if Taylor and Francis or Wolters Kluwer or somebody else pulls out breaks the contract dance and we can't come to terms. And they need to
Yeah.
get rid of all that content. So it's, there are business model aspects to this that also need to be considered when you start talking about how reliable, robust, and you know, good these systems are going to be over time.
Well, neither scenario makes more sense than the other, because in terms of focusing, there could be a case for I'm only going to use licensed content. I'm going to take the
Mhm.
high road. I'm going to pay top dollar for copyrighted content,
I'm gonna make the
and
best.
my products are going to be based on the best. Or
Hmm.
you could do the other and say I'm going to just take what's available, and there's plenty of it, as a bigger volume play at this point.
Hmm.
And so that'll be enough. But neither one of those makes any kind of sense when you're talking about scientific information. You
Right.
the science doesn't know who paid for it, you
Right.
know, and it
Exactly.
doesn't care.
Yeah.
Um,
But the fact that there is a business model cut point inside this potentially, and I think actually,
yeah.
is exactly to that point. It doesn't make sense for science. It doesn't make
Hmm.
sense for the truth-seeking behavior because, again, these are commercial things. They're being offered. They don't necessarily have to do with anything but like helping with the hype cycle and helping commerce move forward. But so I think that's a pretty good overview of some of our thoughts of this. Are there other things we needed to cover?
Um, I was just going to give my um, horrifying AI research anecdote,
Oh, please.
of and it came back around this week as we were looking at some things. It was a couple months ago, and I was playing around with Perplexity as I was doing some research, and the research was on the global burden of disease study, and all the papers that are published, that have hundreds of authors. I don't even know how many, but most of them are published in the Lancet, and they're very high profile papers. And that research, I was doing that as part of talking about impact factor. And as I was digging deeper into the history of the global burden of disease study and learning some fascinating things about that some of them are in the book. And but it slipped in references for the Great Barrington Declaration, which
Mhm.
shares the same three letters, GBD, but it is literally the opposite end of the spectrum of what I was looking to find. One was about a massive collection of data that's being used to help everybody, and the other was this quasi, what did you say? It was a legal
Well,
uh,
yeah, it
firm
started
that
by the
came up with
American
it.
Enterprise Institute. The Koch
Yeah,
brothers got a couple of got Bhattacharya and Kuldorf and someone else together to write up this sort of soft eugenics
yeah,
COVID stance that everybody had to respond to, and it's become notorious, but it's definitely not science. It was something where the Koch Industries and the American Enterprise Institute wanted to get everybody back to work as soon as
right.
possible. And
Yes,
and so you've got, again, science versus um, commerce and intent and business interests and
right.
disguised as science. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and of course, that's Martin Kohlsdorf, and Jay Bhattacharya were uh, behind the Great Barrington Declaration. And
Yeah,
so,
Bhattacharya is now the head of NIH, and Kuldorf just got put on the new reconstituted
yeah,
instant. Yeah,
after he got kicked off, he got kicked right back on by his good buddy,
by his
RFK
good buddy
Jr.
RFK,
Yeah.
friend to all.
So anyway, if you're looking for, I mean, I know how hard it is to disambiguate acronyms, in taxonomies, but these two don't go
That's
together.
horrifying. Yeah. That's terrible. That's a great story, but it's absolutely terrible that it happened. All right, so we're going to move on to discoveries of the week.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so my discovery of the week, and this we have to warn everybody right off the bat. This is going to be if you're sensitive to imagined smells, you may want to brace yourself. We don't want to trigger anybody, but mine came about when I was doing research on supplements and some of the things that came up, and I came across a website called smellyurine.org, which is just a lovely URL and one I didn't expect to encounter ever in my life. And so I always love these delightful little discoveries. And it's a site that takes you through what happens if your pee smells funny and what you might want to, think about and when you might need to call the doctor. And
What was your Google term that brought you to this miracle website, Kent?
I forget. I think it was something about something I'd come across and said something that this supplement will make your pee smell funny. And so I just put in, why does my pee smell funny? And I got to smellyurine.org. Some days are better than others. What can I say? But it also reminded me of one of my favorite scientific studies recently, which was I thought that I knew that if you ate asparagus, that you had a 50-50 chance of having the enzyme that would make your pee smell funny after you ate asparagus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it turns out half of my family has that experience and half of my family doesn't have that experience, so it kind of held up. But what the more recent research found is that it's not an enzyme that makes your pee smell funny. Everybody's pee smells funny. It's only that half of us can smell it.
So our noses are
So our
different.
noses are the source, not the
Yeah.
pee has the same chemicals in it no matter what. You're still peeing asparagus, but only half of us can
Ah,
smell it. So it's like the cilantro kind of thing, only half
yeah,
of us
like
find
super
it. It's like
taster.
soap, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was really an interesting flip that science found where it's like, okay, your perceptions are actually upside down. And I love that kind of stuff. So those are my discoveries of the week.
Wow, so many people are going to have to change their dating profiles of whether they have smelly asparagus pea or not. They need to
Right.
know, can you smell my pea or not?
All right. Swipe right on that one.
All right. Well, my discovery of the week is also olfactory related. Uh, over the weekend, I went to the good Walmart. I don't know, down here, that's a thing. If you tell someone that you go to the Walmart, you said, did you go to the good one? I said, oh yeah, I went to the good one. Because there is a bad Walmart. Um, and I was in the health and beauty section and I saw uh, a shampoo that is Dunkin' Donuts branded, Boston cream pie scented shampoo. And it
That
is
is the good
by
Walmart.
that's what they have at the good Walmart. You can't get that at the bad Walmart, I'm sure. And but not only that, and they had a couple of other flavors. I think they had like a strawberry sprinkle one too, but the Boston cream pie shampoo, donut flavored shampoo just made me just crack me up. And I was wondering if it's Maha approved because it is by a vegan brand. I think it's vegan, it's native, and it's
Mm.
paraben free, aluminum free. So it doesn't have any chemicals that'll clean
But
your
it's
hair,
junk
but
food.
it'll make you but it'll make you smell like junk food.
And other people will be tempted. Oh my gosh.
Or is it some
They're
kind
treading they're on a fine line there. They're on a fine line there.
yeah. Or is it some kind of like really warped cognitive behavioral therapy? Like if you smell like Dunkin' Donuts all the time, you'll get an aversion to wanting to eat them. I don't know.
Well, so did you get it?
No, it was expensive. That was the good Walmart. I don't have that kind of Dunkin' Donuts shampoo money.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to conduct that experiment on your own. But remember, you have to go to the good Walmart to do it.
Good Walmart.
So, yeah, it sounds awesome. That's a great one. All right, so that's it for this week. Let us know what you think. We love your feedback, and we're watching all the data so we can see whether we're doing well. So, thanks for your time. We hope you got something from this. You can reach us at disruptedscience@gmail.com. And on behalf of Joy and me, let's slow down and fix things from now on. How about that?
Yep.
All right, thanks,
All
everyone.
right. See you later.